Nothing important.
Oh, okay, good.
What's the Facebook? I wanted to share it on my page.
Montgomery MFA. Right, it's got us going live. And Montgomery MFA. Okay.
Is it delay?
Whoever has that, do me a favor, and yeah, there's definitely a delay, and let's make sure that the sound is off or we're going to hear it the entire time. All right, there we go. We should be good. All right, so we are up, and it's 3 o'clock on the dot. All right. Everybody's ready. We've got 11 viewers right now. So hello. We are so happy you're here for Artists+Activism, Your Vote, Our Democracy. Still hearing it. I'm hearing feedback. Why isn't that working? I apologize to my artists. This is what happened to me last time too. Hold on 1 second.
You're doing great, Laura.
Unmute that. Oh, thanks, Shannon. I think what I'll do, okay, so I've got it muted there. Why isn't that working? No, because I know I'm hearing it there. Why? I'm so sorry, y'all. Okay, we're a couple minutes over. Y'all, please bear with me. I appreciate you. Let me figure out why this is doing it again. I want to be able to hear y'all, so I need volume, but I don't want to hear the Facebook. I'm horribly embarrassed and confused yet again, and I apologize. It's got me as live. I'm so thankful that everybody who's watching is here, and I guess we'll just roll with it, and I'll try to figure it out. And maybe my phone a friend will call me back. They can help me out. Again, thank you everybody for being here. We are so happy to have you for Artists and Activism. I'm going to go ahead and see. Artists, I would love to introduce you. We've got Milton Bowens, Shannon Anderson, Michelle Browder, and Bob Vardaman. Milton, I would love it if you would go ahead and just introduce yourself, and I will try to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing. And popping in, Milton is originally from living here now and
Yeah, I'm a recent transplant from California. I've been in Alabama now for about a year, just a little over a year. I'm a studio artist, a teaching artist, and um, my primary focus is mixed media work. I do work. All of my paintings deal with history. They're message-driven art, combination of poetry, assemblage. Yeah, and I I find myself here in the South, learning some new stuff, experiencing new things, and it's a pleasure to be here.
we are thankful to have you. Shannon is also a California native. And Shannon, you have been here for about 20 years. You want to give us a little bit of your background also?
Yeah, roughly 20 years. Yeah, I came here to play softball for Auburn and then I never left. I am a graphic designer. Yeah, I stayed forever. I am a graphic designer, and my primary way of creating art these days is through typography and hand lettering. I like to let that kind of dictate a drawing, or it could be just words, it could be a portrait, it could be anything. And using that to just draw attention to certain causes. I use Instagram a lot to get the word out. And then I also work for the Southern Poverty Law Center during the day, also doing graphic design.
Perfect. Thank you, Shannon. And then Michelle Browder is with us. You all probably know her from More Than Tours, but Michelle, you want to give us a quick little introduction? As I just found out, you were originally from Colorado?
Yep. Born in Denver, Colorado. My family and the legacy of civil rights fight is here in Birmingham and in Montgomery. And so we transitioned to Verbena, Alabama, and then after graduation from high school, I went to Atlanta, Georgia. Was having a beautiful life there with the art community, thrive in our community. Who knows where I could have been if I didn't move back home in 2002. And so I moved back here and started with a youth organization, and the rest is history. I'm here now using my art for tours and to hopefully give rise to the voice of not just the civil rights movement, but human rights and the need for change. And we do that using art, history, and conversation.
Michelle, and we're so happy to have you here. And then our fourth panelist today is Bob Vardaman, who is also what I like to call Montgomery famous for his Bob Vardaman event management. But Bob, you want to give us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I just recently moved to Montgomery 30 years ago and to work for the Alabama Shakespeare Festival. And I enjoyed a great experience there working in the administrative side. But as I was saying earlier, we sort of have this history that's historical events that happen in our lives that sort of affect us, and they affect our DNA, and we sort of work from that. And so through my theatrical background and education, I've taken that to create an events company where I'm fortunate enough to create events that do have a message and do become an artistic statement. They are, usually nonprofit organizations that I work with, but I then a lot of for-profit organizations as well. But I try to make as much of a statement as I can through those events. And what I'll be talking about today is a specific piece of art that was created through an event. So it was part of multifaceted creations and designs, and it's sort of lasted. If I can create something that will last, that's an even more of a win-win. Most of my events, I don't have to drive by them the next week. They're sort of go up and come down. And so they only leave impressions. So you end up with a lasting memory, and hopefully it impacts you and it affects you, and you go on. It's like a theatrical experience. But I'm very honored to be with this illustrious group that I admire greatly, and am excited to be part of the panel. So thank you for putting this together for us.
Well, you're welcome, but really more so, I'm just thankful to have all of y'all here. And I figured out that what happened yet again was my Facebook was giving me feedback. I just had to mute my Facebook, but it took me approximately 8 minutes, but I got it. We're good now. So what I'm going to do next, approximately precisely 8 minutes, however you want to look at it. I'm just so glad y'all are here. We're going to get straight into the art, and I'm going to share my screen, and a work of art will come up for each artist, and they will speak on how that relates to the up and your right to vote, and hopefully exercised your right to vote, or you will on Tuesday. But we are just going to get straight into that. And I think, yet again, I said share screen. Yes, share, thank you. And here we go. So that should be up now. Waiting for our delay. Perfect. All right. Artists and Activism, your vote, our democracy. Now to make this go. What is going on? I continue to be thankful for your patience. My slideshow is up. I've got it in presenter view. Why can I not click to the next slide? Nope. While I'm doing this, I would love for y'all to have a discussion, talk about your passion behind voting, why it's important for us, and I promise you I will get to the slideshow shortly.
Shannon, tell me about your graphic design. You have some great posters there behind you. Tell me about
None
those.
of these are mine.
Oh, none of those are yours.
No.
Okay. Oh, okay. I was saying, wow,
Don't give me
are
any credit for this.
okay.
But I started working for the Southern Poverty Law Center, really educating myself on the civil rights movement, really getting involved with everything that happened here in the South. I mean, growing up in California, you learn that you take history classes, but it is not the same as coming here and learning from the people who grew up here, and really kind of diving into the history, and in places that it was really happening. And so I got more involved with the Southern history of the civil rights movement, as well as I work with Justice for Migrant Women who work on farm workers' rights, which is something I grew up with in California. But somewhere along the line, I decided I wanted to just use words, and I kind of have let that dictate which will come up when the slideshow starts. But just trying really hard to
I swear it'll start. Thank you, Shannon.
use art as kind of a universal language. You know, not everyone understands all the policy, all of the the history behind vote. Like there's so much to learn about voting and democracy and the history of it. But at the same time, on a very simple level, I like to try to use art to get people involved in wanting to know more, which I think, since it is a universal language, it's the best way to reach people.
Mhm. Yeah,
Or
our
one of the
topic
best ways
of
to reach
voting is, it's so powerful and it's so manipulated and so important to all of us right now. I mean, even, there's so many issues on the table that we all are, in contact with, whether it's, civil rights or gay rights, women's rights, climate change, religious rights, tons, there's just so much on the table that you are trying to represent and reason with yourself. I mean, I think for me personally, it's a constant learning process of what is how I feel and how my DNA has been created. So I'm in awe to watch other people and learn from their creations. And because it's such a, I'm a visual, as I know all of y'all are a visual person, and it's so important to see and be impressed by that statement that is just, it's embedded in you. It just stays with you for the rest of your life. And and even more so now. I mean, everything is, I don't know, I get older and I tend to still become emotional about these issues and these, even more so as I see the time I've wasted in not, speaking up and not, promoting these really strong statements that need to be out there. And even for myself, hopefully others will follow, but you have to do it for yourself first. I know Michelle does.
Speaking of Michelle, Michelle, since you have that gorgeous and wonderful mural that you've just recently done for SPLC as your background, I'm going to, since I'm struggling with getting the slideshow up, would you mind going ahead and talking to us about that mural and what prompted the creation and what message you were speaking with that?
Sure. Well, I got a call from 21 Dreams, Kalanji, and Kalanji said to me, he was like, Michelle, I think, SPLC, they need some art, right? And so he said, would you be interested in doing it? And I was like, absolutely. So he put me in contact with the lady that was over it or organizing it. And so when I started doing my research, you already know about Southern Poverty Law Center and how, they were really the leading forces behind having this conversation about what we're going through as it relates to human rights and civil rights and gay rights and children's rights and voting rights. And so when I started looking at all of the things that they do or the rights that they fight for on a daily basis, I sent them just a little sketch. And at first, because of the style in which I did it in, I thought, well, maybe this is not, their style. Maybe I should go a different route in terms of, the style of art. But then when I started looking at the publication, and Shannon, I don't know, did you do the cover of the publication with the girl with the fist? The magazine?
No, that's an outside hire.
Okay, so I started looking at the magazine, or actually I got the magazine after we did the mural. And when I say we, I had my students from I Am More Than to come and help me with it. So my students, I got to give them a shout out because they would be upset with me if I didn't. But yeah, so I started looking at the flow and the direction in which you all are taking this conversation, and it is geared more so towards the younger generation and the community and being more inclusive. I thought, okay, so I'm on the right path with the way we executed it. And so I sent Taffany a sketch, and they absolutely loved it. And I was shocked because, Southern Poverty Law Center is very bland on the outside, it's big shiny buildings and everything is just so structured and corporate, and to have these bright bold colors, I was really shocked that they would be open to that. But I was hoping that we captured the essence of what you all are trying to do, which is to be more inclusive and more relatable to young people, and to draw them into the conversation, as well as the gay rights and Black lives, and making sure that people know that apathy is not an option. You can't just stand by on the sideline. So we were really hoping that we gave it, and then the march continues with our beloved Congressman John Lewis, who would visit Southern Poverty Law Center every year when he would come to Alabama to bring people here and to expose them of this history. So yeah, so I was very honored that you all loved it. SPLC, they loved it and just hopped on it right away. And 40 hours later, there it is.
It's such a
So,
bummer that we're not working in the office right now because of
know.
COVID. So we don't get to enjoy it as much as we could, but I'm super excited that it's there. I think it is and was a wonderful addition to the outside of that building. It brings such life to it.
Yeah.
And it's interactive, where there's a spot where you can lay down and take the picture.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's really, really wonderful.
Thank you. So, so that's basically the whole, and to lie down in that area and to be a part of the process. It's like you have to get involved, right? So apathy is not an issue, or an option. So to have people stop and lie there and take a photo, that's part of the participation, part of the process, part of the voting, moving, protest the policy. You got to get involved. And so hopefully people walk away from that. It talks about the DACA, families belong together, give us the ballot, give us the vote. So there are messages in there. And the footprints, I didn't get a chance to tell you all about the footprints, and I'll tell you really quickly, but I had a little girl, it was her birthday, and she loves to paint and draw. And so her dad said, can you let her be a part? And I was like, absolutely. Well, she spilled the paint over, and I was like, but one of my other students said, Michelle, let's just make her footprints, because she stepped in the paint. So now when you go up and you see the footprints, that was a mistake that we made part of the process, because the march continues. And then Justice Ginsburg, she died around this time. And so this was good therapy for myself, because I love Ginsburg, and we were all hoping that she would make it until the end of the election. But of course, we know how that turned out. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle, and for that background on the mural and this conversation. I've got Milton, I've got you, and I think I'm about to be able to pull up the first slide. But if you would go ahead and can you share with us about the exhibition that you currently have up at ASU, because the first piece will be from that one.
Oh, so currently I have an exhibition that's up at Alabama State University. It's titled "Gaming the Vote." It was a body of work that I started working on probably about 3 months after I first got to Alabama. It was sponsored by one of my collectors in California, Warren H. Bonta, and I created the collection for the Warren H. Bonta Family Trust. He was very close friends with Jonathan Daniels, who was one of the Alabama martyrs who died during the Selma campaign. It was after the Selma campaign. So we had talked about for years dealing with trying to bring more attention to the importance of voting and people who have made sacrifices so we all have the right to vote. So the body of work is entitled Gaming the Vote. It's 10 pieces. but there's actually 18 pieces on display at the university because there are 8 additional pieces that actually they're what would be considered my traditional approach to doing work, the approach that I'm most known for, which is assemblage and collage that tie in to the topics that this collection sheds light on. The metaphor behind the entire collection was to look at the psychology of voting and how people look at playing games with your right to vote. So it's heavily metaphor driven. It's text based, but the goal was to just make a connection between traditional board games. I didn't want to deal with video games, and I didn't want to deal with anything other than the old fashioned traditional board games, just because of the psychological competition aspect of the metaphor. So when you're looking at this painting, the game of life, what the painting is basically referring to is the 4 Alabama martyrs who actually died fighting for us to have the right to vote. So you got Jimmy Lee Jackson, Viola Luizio, James Reeb, and Jonathan Daniels. And if you read the painting, it's really just talking about, how people get a calling to do something. Like when you're involved with a cause, sometimes it's not necessarily a manufactured thing. It's just you just get this organic feeling that just compels you to have to get involved. And I think we're seeing a lot of that today across the country, with where we are right now in politics, and people are being called to do something that they haven't done before. It shocks me, when I was doing the research for this body of work, even here in Alabama, in terms of how low voter registration is in some of the areas where some of the most important decisions around voting had been made. Because here, Alabama has one of the lowest voting registration rates in the entire country, but we know that it's steeped in rich history for bringing national attention to the importance of voting. So, I mean, the painting just reads, kinfolk. Uh, it is when we who believe in freedom, real freedom, are faced with the unknown that our true courage springs to the fore like a calling from a higher power. And then it lists the 4 Alabama martyrs, and then it says, someone gave their life for your right to vote. So when you think about that, some people think that's cliche-ish. Like, oh, that's a cliche. People died so you could vote. But real blood has been spilled for democracy. And it's funny because the entire collection, each one of the paintings are connected by the train tracks that run along the bottom of the painting. So each one of the games are actually connected. So you have life, you have Monopoly, you have Trouble, you have, which is actually a tribute to John Lewis, you have Clue, you have Stratego, you have Risk, you have Battleship, you have Chess, and you have Scrabble. Each one of these games, metaphorically, is dealing with a moment in our nation's voting history. So we start with the 13th Amendment, we touch on the 19th Amendment, we look at the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and then we look at the Supreme Court ruling in 2013, which rolled back voter protections that basically has us in the situation that we're dealing with today when you look around the country and see widespread voter suppression in certain states. So it was a calculated approach to look at the psychology of how games by design force you to be competitive. But the one element about a game is that there's a certain amount of chance and luck that's involved for you to win. But voter suppression, you can actually gerrymander and legislate laws that will keep people off voting rolls. So it's a calculated strategy. So like the game Stratego in the collection is dealing with the strategy of how voter suppression actually works. And in that particular painting, and also in the painting Monopoly, I referenced that, presidents get elected for 4 years at a time, but presidents have one of the most powerful tools at their disposal, depending on a moment in history, because if they get that rare opportunity to be able to appoint a Supreme Court justice, that justice is going to get a life term well beyond that presidency. And so a lot of people, when we think about how we look at politics today, we don't look at it in terms of time and place. When you think about, the Constitution and how it was constructed, there's two important things that you cannot find in the Constitution if you've ever taken the time to read it. You'll never find the word democracy, and you'll never find the word woman written in the Constitution. Now, understanding that and knowing that at that time, the life expectancy of a white male didn't really press past 40 years old. So the architects of the Constitution writing that, a judge gets a lifetime appointment, they weren't thinking that this male judge would survive beyond his mid 40s, where today we have people that go well into their 80s and 90s, which changed the dynamic of how we are looking at the way this country is being governed. We are in a modern society, but we're actually being governed under 1700 rule. And that can't be sustainable. It just can't be, because the nature of who we are as a society is changing too fast, and demographically shifting too fast to have a governance that harks back to a time when women and people of color weren't even recognized at all in the governing documents. And that's just fact. So the body of work is trying to just basically get people in a not totally satirical way, but in a more metaphor driven way, to just think and examine where we are today and how are we really looking at the way the forefathers constructed the framework of our nation's governance.
Thank you, Milton, so much. I'm going to go on to the next slide, since I apologize again for my technical difficulties at the beginning. I've been enjoying the conversation so much and listening to y'all talk. Milton, I'm loving this discussion of this piece and the explanation behind it. Thank you, everybody, so much. So Shannon, I've got this one up for you next. Would you like to tell us about this piece?
Love to. So one of the artists I've worked with through Teaching Tolerance at the SPLC, he, along with some colleagues, started this Rise Up, Show Up, Unite idea around voting. And so I was like, I got to get involved. One, to support my fellow artists, but two, because like it's so important, right? And I mentioned before that I think during this voting cycle, I took like a very simplistic approach to how I wanted to try to get the word out about voting. It's super important, but obviously we still, just like Milton said, there's voter suppression. There's people who can't vote but should be allowed to vote. There's so many things, right? But then at the same time, there's a lot of people who choose to not exercise their right to vote. And, it's easy to look at it as like, okay, I'm me. I cast my ballot. How much say is that? How much is my one voice doing in this world that we're living in? And through this election, I thought, this idea of really coming together and like uniting behind voting is the way to look at it, right? So it's like my one vote combined with all these other like-minded people who are voting for this, who are looking for the same kind of change that I'm looking for, or are supportive of the change that I want, and I'm supportive of the change they want. There's obviously, like, we've talked about, there's so many things on the table right now. It was just the idea that as a nation, if all of our votes come together, we can create real change. And not just in this election, but how important it actually is in all these in between elections. Like, you need to vote on your local elections. It's, in 2018, it was very important. The House, Congress, like the Senate, like all these things have a say in what happens to us in our daily lives. We just were speaking about Ginsburg, and then obviously the Supreme Court justice being replaced. You look back to the final year of Obama, and how I think it was 243 days they, held up the vote for the Supreme Court justice, and yet in this election it was pushed through in a very fast fashion. That had to do with the president, but more than that, it had to do with the Senate, right? It's just, we need to be reminded that every single time we vote, it is important. And my one vote combined with your vote, combined with your vote, is how we create real change in this country. And by sitting out of one, obviously, like I said, there's voter suppression, so there's people who can't. But if you have the opportunity and the ability to vote, you have to do it. This is the only say we get. This is the only voice we have, and we don't always get what we want with that voice, and that's a struggle sometimes. But how can I stand here and complain about something if I didn't use my voice to try to create the change that I'm hoping for? So regardless of how an election ends up, I think it's just really important as a nation that we all exercise that power and we show up and unite to do it.
I think we all completely agree with that. Thank you, Shannon. And I really love this piece. I love the way you incorporated that message into the United States image. So that's really beautiful. Thank you.
Was there a specific reason why you chose purple?
I was trying to be nonpartisan in my approach. I obviously have my own preference of who I would like to see elected, but at the same time, you know what? How do I word this? I need to be supportive of every person using their voice to vote, regardless of whether or not I agree with them. And as a person living in the United States, we all have, well, majority of us have this right. We all deserve this right, regardless of your beliefs. And it's sad to me that I think the last election was like a 60% of eligible voters turned out to vote. That's roughly half the nation. Our whole nation, we should all be making this decision together, or we should all be contributing to this decision. And so I wanted to not sway directly with my color choice.
On the topic of the color, Shannon, I do find it interesting that purple comes from red and blue together. Just saying.
That was also in there, but
All right, so Michelle, I know that I already asked you to touch on this because I was having a slideshow, but if there's anything else that you'd like to say on this gorgeous mural, or bring the conversation back around to this, got this up for you now.
No, I think that it kind of speaks for itself. You know, the iconic photo of those people walking from Selma to Montgomery. I don't think I mentioned that. The blue in the background. And then having Black women, a Black woman to lead the way in terms of the march continuing. There's another thing that I failed to talk about, which was the indigenous, how there's so many women, Native women that are missing and murdered. So the woman down at the bottom with the red halo signifies the women, missing and murdered indigenous women. That was a way to slip them in there, because oftentimes we don't talk about their plight as well. So you have the Black Lives Matter, you have DACA, you have the voter suppression and the call to get involved with that. So yeah, and then LGBTQ in the corner there. Yeah, so that's our mural.
I think it's so important what you did, especially with the indigenous woman, with the Black woman leading, with the, you know, calling across all the things that are going on, because obviously we are in a time where people are protesting police brutality, and the Black Lives Matter movement is so important, and it's at this forefront, but there's still kids in cages. There's still, you know, there's still the worry about whether or not LGBTQ rights will get taken away through the Supreme Court. So it's a good and healthy reminder, I think, in this mural that we're battling a lot of different fronts, and that we can't let any of them slip as we are moving forward with trying to create a better United States for everyone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm hoping that's what, you know, came across. We had some very interesting conversations as we were conducting this piece with my students, with people that were walking by. And so I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be a part of this and beckoning the call for people to vote and to get involved. Yeah.
So Michelle, what is the scale of it?
You know what? I cannot tell you how big it is, only because I had help with scaling it up. So Kevin King would tell you that, whatever the scale is. But I would say it's about 15 feet, maybe 15. Yeah, it's a nice size. And we tried to leave room in case, you know, on the sides, in case they wanted to go bigger. But it's a nice size. I can't remember the exact measurements. I just remember drawing and painting. I don't remember the scale up. So, and I had to give Kevin a shout out, because he has become the scaling king of helping artists to scale their pieces up. Whereas I would have just went in and started, you know, drawing. He was like, no, we need to get the proportions right. So, but yeah. It's a pretty big piece though. And then, you know, I don't know if you can see the person there, just like an outline where you're supposed to lay down there. So that should give you a bit of a reference to how big that is. Yeah. So that's all I would have to say about that.
Well, thank you, Michelle, so much. And I would encourage all audience viewers watching, and any panelist who hasn't seen it also, let's make sure we go downtown and lay next to it, get our photo, and feel that message. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right, Bob, tell us about this gorgeous installation sculpture.
Well, this is 4 letters that are powerful letters. That this piece was commissioned by the city of Montgomery, the Montgomery Chamber of Commerce, for a specific event that was the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery March in 2015. And this was installed for a reception that was held at the Renaissance Hotel ballroom that would be attended by hundreds of guests that had returned from Selma back to Montgomery that evening. And this was also in conjunction with the Southern Poverty Law Center's airing or showing their movie in the Montgomery Performing Arts Center, The Bridge to the Vote. So hundreds and hundreds of dignitaries were to attend this event. Over 1,000 people came. So I was commissioned to not only make a statement with art, but also to produce an event. And in my events that I produce, there are many levels of considerations. So I was trying to, you know, you've got food, you've got music, you've got visuals, you've got ingress, egress, you've got to consider where people are seated, where people are, you know, coming in, and lots of details that go into this. So these were sort of the showcase of the event, but they were also centered around a center installation that was a replica of Blind Justice. And Blind Justice and this particular piece was a living person who was dressed as Blind Justice, and they were suspended about 15 feet in the air on a pedestal, on structure pedestal. And then these letters were stationed around the room. So each letter is 10 feet tall, and then they were placed on 4-foot pedestals. So they really had a powerful impact when you walked through the room, of course, with spotlights on them. The V was, I chose a graffiti to kind of commemorate the you know, the anger, the urban, the street kind of vibe for that particular art form. Great graffiti artist named Nolan Odom helped me with where he did the graffiti. We designed the colors and chose the motif. This is an M that is on the front, and on the back is an S for Selma, the M for Montgomery. And these are wooden structures. They were built by a wonderful sculpture artist named Vince Bualda, who has sculpture pieces around town, but he built the actual letters for me, and they had to be somewhat portable, but also they had to have ballast in the bottom. So they, you know, being suspended 4 feet over, and then they're 10 feet tall. I didn't, you know, want anything to happen. So they're ballast in the bottom of them. So not necessarily mobile pieces, but they were moved in. So the V's got this really kind of dramatic choice with the graffiti. The O is a map that symbolizes the march itself. It's a road map from Selma to Montgomery, and then the center of the O is kind of the vast distance between the two cities, and how the challenge it would be for Selma, or for the marchers to go from Selma to Montgomery. The T, which has has a cross-like symbol, is covered in, it's collaged in copies of the 1964 voting ballot. And on the voting ballots at the time were the two emblems of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. The emblem of the Republican Party was the elephant. The emblem of the Democratic Party was the white rooster. And so I went to the Alabama archives and actually got, you know, copies of ballots, and was surprised to see that on that the white rooster was white supremacy was printed on the top of the voting ballot, or that emblem of the Democratic Party. So you see the parties have certainly changed in the 2 years, or in the many years since this. That was not removed off the ballot until 1965. So I topped the T with a white rooster. And there are lots of, a lot of people had questions about the white rooster and where it came from, everything. But on those ballots are, you have the emblems of the white rooster and the elephant. And it did not become I think it became a donkey at some, well, it was actually, there were dual images for that, for the representing the parties at the time, but Alabama had chosen to stick with this white rooster. So, and then the E was sort of the red, white, and blue, the triumphant patriotism, emblem of patriotism with the stars. Another fun artist that I know, Stephanie Davenport, helped me with that process. And so there were 4 of us that worked on this. I mean, I came up with the concept and how I wanted them placed and what I wanted them to look like. And so they are still in existence and still can be viewed and visited and photographed. They're in the Crest building on Dexter Avenue. And they have been brought out from numerous times, and I was honored to co-collaborate with Michelle on kind of a redo of one of the letters. So there's been some changes to it to honor John Lewis. And so it was kind of nice to have Michelle co-collaborate with that, sort of saving the day at the moment, I might add. But it's to me still a very powerful statement, and I'm just happy they're still in existence. The event that this was presented, that these were presented in, were taken. There were other photographs that were projected onto the walls of the ballroom of the Selma March. Beautiful black and white photographs, historical photographs that were around the room. And so you came in. I had the Carver marching band playing as people arrived, and they had floral arrangements in cylinder vases that were lined with fencing, like chain link and barbed wire, to sort of symbolize that that's what the marchers would see as they marched from Selma to Montgomery. They would be passing all these fences and then all these, wildflowers. And so I had tried to do lots of suggestions and lots of symbolism throughout, but the strongest piece, I think, were the vote letters and their power in just those 4 letters, and what was so important to those marchers, and hopefully what is still important to all of us today. So I'm just happy that they're still out there and they're still able to be seen, and will be used from time to time again. I hope they'll be brought out for many other events and taken. You always go down and take a photograph of them, and still visit and still see them. So they still exist after these 5 years. So there we have it.
Thank you, Bob. And I loved when we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, that you referred to this as sort of living art, because you do have to kind of upkeep it and take care of it.
It has become the highest maintenance piece of art I have ever worked on, because it's still, it's in the public eye, and it's touched and photographs of the collage still has to be tacked up at times. And I was just, in fact, in the Crest building about a month ago on my ladder with, spray mount and new copies of the voting ballots, and, touching it up again. And people like to sit on it and photograph on it, have photographs with it. So yeah, it's sort of still a living piece. I kind of refer to it. It never ends. So, but that's great. I mean, I'm happy that it's available for people to photograph, and it's a big statement. They're big letters, and they stand for a lot. So, hoping they will last for a long time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. Any of the other artists want to talk about this piece or have any questions for Bob before we move on?
This is one of those pieces that I say, I wish I would have thought of that. It's absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. On the back of the O, does the map continue onto the back, or is there something?
It did originally. It was that was the V is the only one that has a flip side art piece on the back side. The O is the same piece. But right now, when you see it, the O commemorates John Lewis, and Michelle did some beautiful pieces. The O was this whole piece is it's not an exterior piece, as I have repeated every time that it gets put outside. It's like it's not an exterior piece, so it is not great in the weather. And there was a big thunderstorm. The O, all the letters got wet. So the O did, it was damaged in that the map came off. So Michelle, what I was saying was before, Michelle was so helpful in coming in and because this was the backdrop for the John Lewis speeches for his at his service. When he was on view at the Capitol, and so this would be the backdrop for all the TV stations and cameras, and it had to be repaired immediately, and so the paper came off, and Michelle did some great artwork, and it's still on there. So, but it's the paper's off on the back, so we've got to kind of go back in and do a little touch up. But that's why I said it keeps living. You gotta.
Bob, can we give a shout out to Sarah Beatty Buller? Because I called her and I said, Sarah, these letters need to be out. John Lewis is coming.
Right.
The body is coming, and we need them at the square. So that's where they were supposed to go initially. Right. And then there was a mad panic because they didn't have anything at the podium so I said, well, okay, we could just use them for the backdrop. Right. And so Sarah, thank you if you're watching, because she said yes. And
well, and Sarah's been the one who agreed to house them, and they were in City Hall for a number of months, and we're on view there. You could visit there, but they're big pieces, so they need some space and they need some scale. And so Sarah, then they did go outside for about 6 months, and they really suffered greatly from the weather. So then I had to redo them yet again. Then they went into the Crest building, and they've been housed there in the lobby, so you can visit and see them. And so Sarah's just been great support in keeping these living and keeping these going, and making it able to be used, and of course and then to go visit and be part of them and enjoy them. So it's not the only 4 letters I know, though. So I'm just saying we may have some others. Who knows?
And Bob, you said it's currently at Crest, right? So
it's in the lobby at Crest.
Okay, the same as we want everybody to go downtown and take a picture with Michelle's mural outside of SPLC. Want to make sure we go see the vote also. All right, I don't want that to obstruct. Milton, you were up with this. Please.
Oh, so this piece, this might kind of give people an idea of how long I've been doing this. This piece is all the way back from 2002, and it's really it's entitled "The Troubles I've Seen," and it's really just a take. The main body of the main premise of the piece is to deal with Lincoln's speech, the Gettysburg Address, and what that speech has meant um, to American politics, but how a lot of times uh, the poetry of America doesn't align with the reality of America. And that's what this entire collection that this piece comes from, which was in the collection was entitled Me, Myself, and the Other Guy. And it was taking a three-part look at how does an African American male fit into Americana. And so it was broken up into three parts. And this was one of the pieces basically from the political portion of the painting. Um, and you see some of the presidents represented. You see Nixon, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, and Ronald Reagan. And it says a picture's worth 1,000 words, and these guys will deny every single one. um, when you're looking at the whole body of the composition of my work, it's somewhat of a tactic that I'm using to try to draw the viewer in. So inside the painting is going to be one message and one body of text. But if you notice around the painting, around the edges of the painting, there'll be some additional imagery, some symbolism, and words that basically just run along the edges of the painting that carry an entirely different message. But if you look under the black area in the middle of the painting, is basically a remix of the Gettysburg Address. And I'm basically just talking about uh, how powerful Lincoln's words were, but how they fall hollow on the African American experience. So when I'm talking about looking at equality in America, I'm posing a question to the viewer and saying, if America is to be considered the great melting pot, why has African Americans been viewed as the coals? So it's a take on understanding where we are today in a conversation. Now, keep in mind, I mean, I did this painting in 2002, and just recently here in 2020 was the first time you had an honest discussion within the media over the celebration of Juneteenth and what is America's actual origin of this nation's independence. So, I mean, we got a lot of people who sit on the 4th of July as the hamburger hot dog celebration, but Frederick Douglass wrote a scathing essay in the 1800s saying that the 4th of July doesn't mean anything to the Negro. And it wasn't until this year that that essay and that discussion of Juneteenth, now, it could have been fueled by Trump trying to take credit for saying he made Juneteenth popular, which I'm not so sure about that. But historically, Juneteenth was not a holiday that was discussed in the mainstream media. So, depending on how you want to look at that, this is the first year we got an honest discussion within the media over there is dueling opinions on the independence of America, because some people will always hold 1776 close to their heart, but you have a whole group of other Americans who their independence wasn't realized until the 1800s, 1865 to be exact. And that comes with an asterisk. So some would even argue that the independence of the African American wasn't realized till 1965. And it's a legitimate case, because if you look at the 13th Amendment, because the Emancipation Proclamation did not grant emancipation for all African Americans. This gets into a history thing that has to be thoroughly investigated to clearly understand it. So, but you're looking at the ratification of the 13th Amendment. But in that 13th Amendment, there is a clause, and that's what this painting is basically trying to have people deeply examine and explore. The 13th Amendment says that, if you are duly convicted of a crime, you can basically be returned to a state of slavery. So if you are white in America and you have never been enslaved, how can the Constitution return you to a state of something that you have never previously been? So if white people have never previously been enslaved, the Constitution can't return them to a state of slavery because they were never enslaved to begin with. So we know that that asterisk in the Constitution is directly related to the African American and the African American experience. So that's when we have to look at and fully examine this flowery language. Now, the Gettysburg Address is probably considered Lincoln's greatest speech. It is definitely one of the greatest political speeches ever delivered, but it can fall on deaf ears to a whole audience of Americans who can't fully embrace the patriotism that is delivered within those words. And that's pretty much what this painting is dealing with. And that's why I titled it The Troubles I've Seen.
Amen. Beautiful.
I really liked your mentioning of the conversation about Juneteenth, because it was, I was shocked that, well, the Trump part, I was like, whatever. But I had known about Juneteenth, but this was really the first time I had heard it really like discussed, like through the media, right? Which I think is so important, because different to when I grew up, kids and the younger generation, the media is like in their face all the time. So I was happy to see it being discussed so much, because I feel like that's something that that at some point kids might go to their teachers, to educators, to, might be discussions about it at a younger age. I don't remember learning about it in school in the 80s or 90s, but like if it was a brief mention, like I think it's really important that it was discussed in the media, and it's, and I think that this piece is really important, because it is true. You need to really examine things. It's like we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the woman's right to vote, but was it the woman's right to vote? It was a white woman's right to vote. So actually, all women haven't had the right to vote since it was 1965. So like the 100th anniversary, what are we really celebrating? Yes, it was an important moment in history, yes, but like when you say the woman's right to vote, just like you're talking about July 4th, it's not telling the whole story. It's just a little. It needs to be these things need to be examined further, because they are not the full situation.
The one thing that I think this past 4 years is going to do for America as a whole is force people to have to know that this nation's history has layers. Now, you may not agree, you may not be comfortable with those layers, but they must be uncovered and discussed. The New York Times is working on a wonderful campaign, the 1619 Project, which could be argued that that's not actually even the accurate date of when slavery became legal in the United States, but that's what the date that most scholars have settled on, 1619 Project. So when you're looking at the 1619 Project as a starting date, and then you just look at these dates, 1619, 1776, 1863, 1865, 1870, 1963, 1964, 1965. I'm not even going to get into 1955 and all of the atrocities that happened in between Reconstruction, getting to the modern civil rights movement. There's too many dates to mention. But when you start to look at that, and then you hear this one date, 2013. Well, that 2013 date probably is one of the most important dates in all of the dates that I just mentioned, because at that time, Justice Roberts said racism no longer exists in America. The protections that African Americans needed to secure their democracy and the right to vote are no longer needed. And they rolled back voting rights protections. Now we look at the rampant voter suppression that we have in our current election today. And there is no protections against it. So now each one of these things have to be fought in a local court and try to make a case to make it back to a Supreme Court that now has been weighted conservative. And I don't think people should be afraid of a conservative court. I don't want people to, misconstrue what I'm saying. The Constitution is a living, breathing document. And what do we mean when we say the Constitution is a living, breathing document? Well, it means that the Constitution is open for interpretation. How a Constitution is interpreted, how this Constitution is interpreted directly affects the people and the will of the people. So I would argue that if you have a Supreme Court justice that is a female that says, I'm going to look at the letter of the law when it comes to the Constitution, that makes no sense right there because she's not mentioned in the Constitution. So she's interpreting a document that doesn't even mention her, which means that there has to be nuanced understanding of where we are and understanding the governance of this country.
Milton, I want to make sure that you are, I don't want to interrupt you. I've been having a little bit of some internet difficulties on my end, so I do not want to interrupt if you are still speaking on this.
Oh no, I mean, that's it. I could say more, but
I'm also just happy to listen. I told Milton when we were preparing for this that I could just listen to him talk. I love everything that he has to say, and I feel so. I want to take every course he's going to teach anywhere. Thank you, Milton.
Can I say one thing to Shannon directly?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The reason I asked you about your color choice, the purple, is because it was brilliantly brought up that blue and red make purple. And if you think about blue and red, since the beginning of time, blue and red have always been at odds. They have always been at conflict. Roman generals would get red capes for decimating entire civilizations. Greek generals would get blue capes for doing the exact same thing. You fast forward through history and you come to the Revolutionary War. George Washington and the rebel army wore blue coats. If you look at any painting of George Washington crossing the Delaware, he's in blue. The rebel army wore blue. The British Army's nickname was the Redcoats. Our political parties are divided by these two colors. Democrats blue, Republicans red. This holds true even when you go through urban conflict. Crips and Bloods, blue and red. Norteños and Sureños, red and blue. It doesn't matter if you're, whatever. These colors have been at odds since the beginning of time, all the way through our present culture today. But if you could take the time and just get them to come to an understanding, to blend, to come together, to unite, you get purple. Well, anybody who has studied art history and knows color, purple is the one color universally recognized in the world as royalty. If I keep you divided, red and blue, you're at odds since the beginning of civilization. If I can get you to unite, you got the potential to be royalty and you don't even realize it, but it's as basic as understanding color.
That is so much more than me just mixing red and blue. So I'm so appreciative of that. And for me trying to just stay in a nonpartisan, which for me, purple is the obvious choice for that, right? It's like you mix them together, you're seeing somewhere in the middle. And obviously that's, we grow up and realize we all can't have what we want. But if we were to end up somewhere in the middle, we'd be a whole lot better than, we would be a happier nation overall if we could come together on more stuff. But now that you said that, that's much better. I'm gonna use it.
And Milton, I'll say that I got chills when I mean, I knew where you were going as soon as you said, and what do we know purple as is for royalty, but I don't know how the audience felt. I know that we got a lot of hearts in the reaction. But that gave me chills. Thank you for that. All right, and then our last one up, Shannon, I put this one last. I know we also have Bob's stunning vote sculptural piece, but I felt with this being a little directly closer to home in the shape of our state. But Shannon, I will let you speak on it.
Milton brought it up earlier. We have a very low registration rate in Alabama. But even more so than that, I wanted to kind of take on my own little tiny grassroots campaign all on my own to try to initiate more voting across all of the United States. And so the natural place to start was obviously where I lived. So I sat down and I was like, what can I do? What can I do? And then I was like, why would I not just make the state out of the word vote? And so I started with Alabama and used hashtags and different tag different organizations and whatnot on Instagram to kind of spread through this younger millennial to, I don't know what I am. I'm like on a cusp. I don't want to claim millennial, but I think
Shannon, we are elder millennials. You know it.
I'm glad they put elder on front of that. That's a beautiful thing. So appreciated. But social media is a really great way to get people's attention these days. So I started with Alabama. I'm almost done with all of the United States at this point. But I took each state and tried to tag if they had like a youth voters Instagram account or like a plan to vote Instagram account, voters guide accounts. And I've done it with each state with the hopes that, come November 3rd, whether or not you've mailed in your ballot, which this is a whole new year, right? This is a very different voting experience for the masses. But so I started kind of early with this, with, making sure that if you have the ability to vote early, vote early. If you have, if you wanted to do absentee, because of COVID, all of these, different, it's just a different way to vote. But I've been trying to build up to November 3rd and have the entire United States done, where I've kind of directly gotten different voter organizations in each state's attention with how important it is to vote. And so they're all a bunch of different colors. Eventually I'll do the whole map of them together. And it just kind of represents the fact that each state, this is super important because you're not just voting for the president, you're voting for your senator, you're voting on amendments. There's just show up, unite as a whole, that is important, but then you need to break it down, and each state is important. We have our own things that we are voting on. So, and here in Montgomery, we had a huge Montgomery public school vote on the ballot. So, you just this is a nationwide vote this year, but it's also a state vote. So I just wanted to kind of take my own little grassroots way of getting the attention of as many states as possible. And, using a very simple way of showing it through art to get people to notice that this is important.
Shannon, did you do these as the stickers also, or have these been made into stickers yet?
I had the Alabama ones made into stickers. And then, but that's the only state I did. Just because I could get it out to some people here. But yeah, I did do them with stickers.
Do you
And then I
have
had
any-
one more.
I
Milton,
was
go.
gonna, I was just gonna ask, does she have any plans of turning that one into a T-shirt? I want a 2X tall.
I was actually thinking about how I could, like, I obviously put 2020 in all of these for this year, but taking the 2020 off and then kind of like Bob, letting it live on through each voting cycle.
And then I
Yeah,
had
I'll
one more
make you a
question.
shirt.
You were mentioning how each state you've done in a slightly different color. So how have you chosen the colors for the states, or is that just in the moment?
It's in the moment based on because I'm trying to use as many colors as possible, right? In the idea that everyone's vote is for something different. We all are different. We're unique. Some of the colors are gonna, there's obviously not enough to do 50 states that are completely different, but that there's different shades to reds and blues and yellows and greens, and that this idea of us being a melting pot is true. There are, and obviously there's problems with that, Milton, we already got into that, but just to kind of represent that as a whole, the United States is a group of like-minded and very different minded people, and we all got to come together at some point, and our differences no longer matter. Let's focus more on our commonalities and how we can work as one. But yeah, in the moment.
Thank you for that, Shannon. And I think we all are on board with Milton's suggestion of this being a shirt. So do it.
I might do that.
That
Come
is the-
2022 when we vote again.
That's the end of our slideshow. Does anybody want to go back to any of the art to discuss before I take that away and just let us have a face-to-face conversation? I think we're good on that. Okay. All right. So I've been monitoring the questions and comments as we've been going, and we haven't had anybody ask questions per se, but I will first of all tell all four of you that when every single one of you was talking at one point during your speech, the heart button got like held down and they were just like exploding with hearts. So everybody loves the art of each of you and the message that each of you is sharing. So thank you all so much for your words and your art and your voice. Specific comments that I got that I wanted to share. We had Fallon McQueen commented a couple times, but I wanted to share one in particular. Milton, she said, art unlocks so much truth. And that was up during one of your works of art. I mean, I think it's applicable across the board here, but I thought that was a really nice comment. And then Bob, when you were discussing each letter of your vote, we had Angela Amador or Amadore, I apologize, Angela, said that fascinating story of the white rooster. Thank you. So you gave us a little bit of background there too that not everybody knew. So thank you for that.
I think as we, if I can just comment, as we, as I worked on these pieces, it was, I mean, I went to the archives and started just digging through information and documents and just trying to educate myself on the march. And there's an amazing amount of information and documented material that's out there. And that's what really made a big impression on me. And I think that study and that research did create an impression on me that I'll carry through the rest of my life. And I mean, luckily I was tasked with this job to create, a statement, and this was, I knew it would be viewed by, I knew John Lewis would be there. I knew that Julian Bond would be at this event. I knew there would be so many people there to see it. So I wanted it to have a visual impression, but also have a historical connection to it. So all of that research, it really made such a big, impression on me, and just in that research and history that I was not necessarily taught, and history that I was not aware of. And so you gotta get in there and dig and find it. And luckily now, through one of the most impressive artistic creations that has hit this country, and certainly Montgomery, is the Legacy Memorial at EJI, and how that piece is so true and so strong and so incredible, and has had, I think, probably the biggest impact on me and on my understanding of history and rights and oppression and the South, and it's that piece of art, my gosh, is just incredible. And I didn't want to go through this whole panel without bringing that up. I know it was not, but I know we've all seen it and have all been just amazed at its design and its impact. And those are truths that have to be exposed, and those are truths that have to be experienced by a younger group, by youth who do not know about the history of oppression, and the history of lynching, and the history of civil rights, and that's all of the country. It's not just a Southern story, it's an American story. And so I think, that's those things that move you and make you become compassionate about the political movement of your life, is so important. And so hopefully, there's a movement behind it. And I know each of these individuals are creating pieces that will have followings and have make an impression on many to come. So anyway, there we have it.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm 37. I'll be 38 in December. So roughly 20 years since I got my right to vote. This feels like the most important election that I have had the opportunity to vote in. I moved to the South. My freshman year of college was when 9/11 was, and I thought that was gonna be that thing that, in my lifetime, like when my mom talked about Kennedy being shot, like these, I was like, I thought that was gonna be this big, one of the bigger deals. And I feel like these past 4 years have been the moment in my lifetime that I think, well, it's more like 5-ish years. I don't want to do all the math. But no one told me there'd be math. That's why I became an artist. This feels like the most important vote that I've had the opportunity to cast a ballot in, which I already did. And Tuesday is gonna be a very interesting day. I don't wanna say to or pro or con what I'm thinking in my head. But this is I felt for a whole year, especially being locked inside this house during COVID, that this is like I feel like this year has just been building and building to this day for me personally. So I think that's why I took a more active role this presidential election and using art to find a way to encourage people to take action.
That's wonderful, Shannon. And I thank you also for bringing up COVID. And I know that is something that is obviously on the minds and all around everybody constantly right now still. And it does affect, if you have already voted or if you're nervous about going to vote on Tuesday, or, it is an active part of this election. And I am appreciative, as Shannon is saying, of art and how art has helped us or can help us be just encouraged to stay focused on what's important, and just remember that we all need to put that vote out there, no matter who or what you were voting for. It's still your right, and it's something that you should be proud to exercise as an American.
And healthcare is a big part of this. So with COVID,
Michelle or Milton, I would love to hear from either of y'all.
If doing research for Game in the Vote, the collection is at ASU. I had concepted the whole collection, started actually making the artwork, was able to take trips down to Montgomery, to Selma, Birmingham. And the one thing that I find interesting, and actually former President Barack Obama just said it the other day during one of his stump speeches in Florida. And he said that, what would this country look like if we had 80% or 90% of registered voters actually vote? We haven't seen that democracy. So when we talk about the importance of voting, there is a historical apathy in this country. 2008, Barack Obama was able to pull record turnout, but he only turned out 65% of the vote. You got 60%, just at 60% the last time. Most midterm elections they pull anywhere between 50 to 57%. When midterm elections are some of the most important elections that we have, because those are typically policy elections. They determine your Senate seats, your city councils, attorney generals, those local positions. So in this discussion about voting, the one thing that shouldn't get lost is that it don't matter who you vote for. You just need to vote. Because this notion that we have become so partisan and so tribal that we have to control who's voting or steer the electorate to one side or the other, that's not democracy. Democracy is letting everybody weigh in, and whoever is able to make their case the best with the people and their constituents who they serve should get that right. Now, today, you can't even point out when a politician doesn't honor their constituents. You immediately get attacked. it immediately becomes a dig or a partisan issue. But if you have a politician who is on video and says, this is my position, and then they give you an interpretation of the Constitution to support that opinion, then not 4 years later, that position shifts, and then they give you a different interpretation of the Constitution to support their shift. That tells you that the Constitution is a living document and it's open for interpretation. And people flip-flop with it all of the time. And that creates a certain amount of frustration in politics, because people think that they have to be a constitutional scholar to understand, what is the rule of law? What is the letter of the law? So it's not as complicated as people might think. You don't have to be a constitutional scholar to understand the power of your individual vote. All you need to understand is that somebody's trying to keep you from not exercising it. That's enough to let you know that there's power in it.
Can I just say this?
Yes, please.
It matters. For me, it does matter who you vote for. Because when you look at the Platinum Plan and you look at all of the rhetoric that is happening, I am scared to death. I'm terrified. I'm sitting over here, just like my body's going through convulsions, because I'm terrified of if I could be totally transparent with you, ma'am, I'm terrified for November 3rd of which way this country is going to either continue to go or where we are now. I'm terrified. So it does matter. And I hope that people, art is the only thing that I have to kind of channel my anxiety, because as a Black woman and any Black individual, man or child, we should be terrified. I've always said that my father was the first Black prison chaplain that was appointed by George Wallace. And because I was bullied in high school, when you talk about the school to prison pipeline, now what is called now the cradle to prison pipeline, I was very much a part of that. And it was disrupted because my father had enough sense or enough intuition or discernment to say, Michelle, if you don't use art as your way of protest, as your way of activism, I will soon one day find you and come and visit you in Tutwiler prison. So he said, I would much rather give you 5 tubes of paint and t-shirts for you to channel your anxiety and your anger from being bullied, marginalized, criminalized as a Black woman. And so I did that. I took my art and I found myself, in my art. And then as I've become older, activism. And so, it's just, now that we're in this time in America, I've always said to my parents, when I listen to their stories about, living in the Jim Crow South or the Great Migration that my father was very much a part of, fleeing Birmingham because of a white cop wanted to put a knife in his veins and let him bleed out, hence going to New York, and my mother going from Chicago to Denver. I always told my parents I would not be able to live at that type of, in that era. But here we are. And just today, to be approached by a Karen as I'm giving a tour, I'm fearful for myself. And I'm hoping that art and my activism will continue to be an avenue, because I couldn't live in a Jim Crow South. And thankfully, thankful for the Southern Poverty Law Center, for the city of Montgomery allowing me to do the Black Lives Matter mural, because I'm literally shaken by what we're seeing. And so when people say, just go out and vote. No, I need you to explain to me where Black people in America, we see where the LGBTQ, their rights are being threatened as well. We're seeing where voting rights, Shelby versus Holder, we can see where the attacks have been issued on that of the voting privileges, and Black lives being labeled as, a threat or a menace or a society. And I hope I'm not getting off here, but when you ask me a question about art and activism, mine is directly tied into my sanity in 2020, because I cannot live in a Jim Crow South. And now we're dealing with Jim Crow's cousins and nephews and sons and daughters. And I'm hoping that my art and the acceptance of it will sustain me. Because God forbid if we have another 4 years. You understand what I'm saying? So artists and activism, that's where my heart is. That's where my sanity is rooted in a brush in 2020. So I just wanted to get that off my chest, because I can only be transparent about how my vote really matters, but then doesn't. When we look at what happened with George and with George Bush and who was it? Hillary Clinton, the popular vote and all of this, it just art, art is so much more than just something to do and something to talk about and something to see. And for many of us, it's our sanity. And for me, right now, it's my sanity to roll over, pick up your phone on any given day and someone is shot and killed. And then you're labeled a terrorist because you say, but I matter. Humanity matters. And if you can find it in art, then it matters who we vote for. So I'll just turn off my mic now.
Mm.
Right. Before you turn off your mic, Michelle, I have a question for you. I'm curious. Where does the fear come from? What has you so afraid? I'm curious.
What it's not what Klan, because I grew up in Virginia, Alabama, where the Ku Klux Klan were my next door neighbors 10 years apart. So it's not that part. It's I'm afraid of what I'm going to do or what I'm going to say. Okay. My father fled the Birmingham because he was afraid of what he was going to do. Because we come from a long line of civil rights leaders and fighters for truth and reconciliation and justice. And I'm afraid of what I will say. Without, it's always, with Black people in particular, especially Black women, you can't have an honest dialogue or a candid dialogue without being viewed as being brash or harsh or combative, right? So I'm just, looking at how things are right now, where people have been emboldened to confront you or to say things to you just out of the Jim Crow era, and how they deal with you. I'm too strong for that. So I'm trying to learn through art and through my activism is to channel that discomfort. You understand what I'm saying? Like, and art has been my method for so long, but now we're in a different time here. My father said to me, my 79-year-old father said to me, Michelle, he was like, I hope that God preserves me to see, see greater things. He said, but I don't think I want to be here to go back. He said, I can't go back to Jim Crow. He said, Jim Crow is here and it's getting worse because of the emboldening of who's in office. So it matters who we represent us as a country, as a state, as a senator, as a representative, as a mayor. So I'm voting for dignity and respect and humanity and love.
And I would agree with you and say that everything you said is factually accurate and very true. But the one thing that I've come to understand is that we can't give fear the microphone. We give fear too much credit. And let me explain to you what I mean by saying that. All you have to do is just examine history. Everything that we are experiencing today under the current administration is a regurgitation of a very old playbook. It's not new. And everything that we're seeing play out in terms of legislation and policy has been a 40-year plan. It didn't just happen over the past 4 years. The taking over of the Supreme Court, trying to get it weighted conservative, has been a 40-year strategy. When you look at Donald Trump's campaign slogan, "Make America Great Again," that was Ronald Reagan's campaign slogan. It's regurgitated. And the funny thing is, like, when we look at Trump becoming president, there's a nuance to this story. And the story that people tend to not look at is that the majority of the people didn't vote for Donald Trump, yet he became president because of America's system. He won by less than 1 percentage point in 3 swing states: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And the reason he won in those 3 states is because Hillary couldn't carry white women. There was low voter turnout for African Americans, but that's nothing new. And any campaign strategist, any campaign manager wasn't expecting Hillary Clinton to pull Barack Obama numbers with minorities, because Barack Obama pulled historic numbers. So they knew Hillary wouldn't pull those numbers from minorities. They were banking on Hillary being able to carry a larger percentage of white women that she couldn't. That's what got Donald Trump elected in 3 key swing states. Now, those 3 key swing states also were able to change their voting laws because of the 2013 rollback of voter protections by the Supreme Court. So there's layers to politics. But when you look at how politics affects us in our day-to-day life, under Barack Obama, you had the assassination of innocent Black men and boys by police, and we had a Black president, 2 Black attorney generals, and we still couldn't get people brought to justice for civil rights violations with people of color in positions that should have been able to do it because of the way policy is written. So when we talk about, our community and people not being registered to vote, when we talk about what actually generates change, you have the control over your policy right in your local elections, but people don't show up to vote for their state's attorney general. And the prosecution of these police officers when they do something wrong, the burden doesn't fall on the federal government. That's a state issue. You don't have to look any further than Louisville, Kentucky, in the Breonna Taylor case to see how an attorney general can control the narrative and protect a system. I'm not talking about individuals. I'm talking about a system. We are talking about systems that are steeped in discrimination and oppression. And these systems go all the way back to the 1700s. So I tell people, I'm not giving fear any more attention, because I know every aspect of history in terms of the minority experience, people have faced fear. This is just our turn to face fear. And I say that we don't face fear with fear. We face fear with facts. And at the end of the day, I always tell people, before the truth can set you free, you have to recognize which lie is holding you hostage.
I kudos that.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a new song out called "Try Jesus, Don't Try Me," because I throw hands. I'm gonna leave you right there, friend.
Michelle, I want to say that while you were so heartfully sharing, we had a comment from William Brantley. He said, "Love Michelle. I knew your father at Kilby." So I just wanted to put that out there to you. And I also wanted to personally say from me to you, because while you were talking, you said, "Go ahead and turn off my mic." And my response to that was absolutely not. I'm so thankful. You are an imperative voice in this panel and in the art community and just Montgomery in general. We are just thankful to have you. So I will not turn off your microphone.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
It is very appreciated because
Yeah.
I've been trying so hard to not say things, but then at the same time, you're right. I firmly believe that as a U.S., we all have the right. The right to vote belongs to every man, every woman, regardless of race, religion, gender, but the whole thing, right? But my vote matters deeply to me because I agree. I don't want to go another 4 years. I don't want to see another Charlottesville. I do not. I mean, that is something I never thought I would see in my lifetime. Men walking down the street saying, slogans from Nazi Germany. This is like it's almost, it's like you knew it was always there. Systemic racism has always been here. The racism has been in this country this whole time. But how bold it has gotten in these last 4 years is exactly what you said. It's terrifying. And I agree with the not wanting to live in fear, but in some ways, I believe that a lot of the way that Trump got elected was by stoking fear into people about the other, those that are not like them. And, part of my vote is based in fear of what will come in 4 years. And I think in a way there's a healthy amount in that fear that I'm like, I am afraid for people. I'm afraid for people of color. I'm afraid for the LGBT community. I'm afraid for non-Christians. I'm afraid for just a plethora of human beings. And in fact, I believe the majority of human beings in this nation, I'm afraid for them. And it is disheartening when you look back at Hillary and you go, she won the popular vote. So by the United States standard, technically that's who we wanted. And it is not who we got. And I am there's a healthy amount of fear that could happen again, where I see the majority of who votes wanting one thing and not the other. And technically in this state, my vote usually goes unaccounted for, if you know what I'm saying, because it is not, because it's not the majority here. And it's, so yeah, I feel like this vote matters more to me than anything that I have done in the past 4 years. My art is my savior to this. It is my way of expressing anger and fear and love and kindness and all of the emotions that I have felt as a roller coaster. And it's my way of doing it in a very constructed way. And it also gives me time to formulate it so it doesn't, it's whatever. But it's just my vote matters more to me than any vote I've ever made. Even the last one 4 years ago, it matters even more right now.
Let me touch on a point that you just brought up. You said that, based on your position, your vote here in this state probably isn't going to matter because this state trends a certain direction, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But how your art can basically trump, no pun intended, trump that is how art is used effectively to educate voters. And not just here in the state of Alabama, but your vote has the power to educate in Wisconsin, in Michigan, and in Pennsylvania. See, the funny thing is when you look at the fear tactics that were used in 2016, they're not building a wall in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, or Michigan. So that rhetoric shouldn't have an impact on the electorate in the Midwest, but it's still effective in certain parts of the country in terms of just ideology and stoking fear. But the Electoral College determines our president, not the popular vote. So Hillary Clinton getting 3 million plus votes than Donald Trump is somewhat of an irrelevant argument politically, because those 3 million votes could have all came from California, New York, and Chicago. Those are just 3 states. But she could have ran up the total in those states to get that number, which appears that she had 3 million more people that wanted her to be president than Trump, but that's not spread across all 50 states. And that's the problem with just going with the popular vote. Now, there is an easy solution, but the Electoral College is what determines our president. So it's a winner take all situation that goes all the way back to slavery. The Electoral College was designed because of slavery. And until we have honest conversations about the governance of this country and how it is still tied to and connected and deeply rooted in the principles of slavery, we can't have honest conversations. The easiest solution would just be to divide electoral votes based on the percentage of votes that people won in the state. Then you wouldn't have this understanding of a swing state. This state is a swing state. That's what state is, a blue state or a red state. All states in America are swing states, and I'll prove it to you. In 1976, Carter won Texas, a Democrat. California, which is looked at as a blue state today, was solidly, for at least close to 16 years, a red state. Reagan won it twice. Bush Sr. won it once before Clinton was able to flip it. California has had a host of Republican governors. It is conservative. So this notion that California is always or has been or will always be a blue state, it's not. The person campaigning for an office is what charismatically creates the electorate. We see right now that Joe Biden has Georgia and Texas in play. Now, that just could be just because people are tired of the current administration, or it could be that they actually believe that Joe Biden is a moderate and he's going to create policy that benefits all the people, so they see themselves in that conversation. But to flip a Georgia or Texas, historically, you're looking at the shifting of parties to begin with historically. Dr. Martin Luther King was a Republican until Kennedy came to his aid and he shifted political allegiances, and he brought every person from the civil rights movement following his nonviolent movement over from Republican to Democrat. Because prior to that, Democrats were considered Dixiecrats, and they controlled the southern region of the country. We have to be able to use art to educate people on history. But, you know, I don't know how many of you guys go into classrooms and work with young people. You go into classrooms today and kids say they don't like history, that it's boring. They don't want to study it, when it's probably the most important thing in terms of general knowledge that is going to benefit them for the rest of their lives. So I tell every artist that I encounter, use your work as broadly and as effectively as you can push it, because just using work to educate as opposed to just decorate is the future of art in general. I make art to educate, not just decorate. And that's going to be the future of art, period. So I commend everybody here today. I think you guys are wonderful artists. I really appreciate all the projects that were presented today. And, you know, we have to just get back to respectful dialogue. James Baldwin, to me, said it best. We can agree to disagree, but when that disagreement infringes on my humanity, then that's what I have a problem with. But we are not having respectful dialogue, and that's hopefully what we can figure out a way to help art get us back to.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Milton. You just said this idea of how younger students today, or students today in general, aren't as interested in history. And it is so true that art can play such a powerful role in even making them interested in history, and they don't even realize it. Like they'll be learning while they're creating something or learning about something. And so, yes, it absolutely is so important. And then I wanted to touch on one more time before we wrap up. Bob, you said when you were discussing EJI, the idea of needing to educate ourselves. And, you know, this panel has been amazing, y'all. All four of you, I appreciate you so much for taking the time, sharing your art, and just your vision and why art's important and why voting is important. But yes, we need to make sure that we all educate ourselves before we do vote, you know, because maybe you don't really know who you're voting for. Maybe you don't really know what you're voting for if you don't research it first. So yes, educate yourself. Thank you. And if you don't think you need it, look at the art and then research what that art is teaching you, because maybe that is a further education that will help you with have a better understanding of, again, what you need to vote for and what you really are voting for. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you to the audience for taking the time to be here with us. It is Saturday. It is Halloween. Not everybody celebrates Halloween, so if you don't, it's just a gorgeous Saturday. But thank you all. We are so just happy and thankful for the time spent and the art and the voices shared. Any final words from artists before we wrap it up?
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
Of course. We were so happy to host you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invite.
Well, you're welcome.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.